Milk's as popular as ever. But should we think more about how it's produced?
The average yield for a dairy cow daily is about 24 litres a cow, 40% higher than it would have been about 30 years ago.
The way the industry keeps the milk flowing is becoming more controversial.
They shout, they'll scream for that baby, pace around the pen.
Panorama's been given shocking undercover footage from one large dairy farm in the UK.
I've seen cows being kicked while they are down. I've seen a cow hit with a shovel in her face.
Oh my God, it's going up into the air. That's terrible.
Intensive farming helps keep milk cheap, but is it now time for us to pay more?
We're too used to paying next to nothing for milk and all food products. We just don't value the milk enough to start with.
Tonight, we ask, what is the true cost of milk? The dairy industry produces 15 billion litres of milk annually, worth £9.2 billion to the economy. But there are growing concerns about the welfare of some of the UK's 1.9 million dairy cows. Last year, the campaigning charity Animal Equality sent an investigator to work undercover on a large dairy farm in Wales. They've shared their footage with Panorama. Some of it is hard to watch. To make sense of it, I'm meeting the man who filmed it. He's asked us to disguise his identity. What was the basic routine at the farm?
Well, I was general worker, assisted with milking and other tasks that are required on the farm.
He worked on the farm over a couple of months. One of the first things he saw was a newborn calf being separated from its mother.
The calf, he was still wet, moist from the birth, and the mother cow saw the wheelbarrow. She immediately ran to her calf and started licking him. This calf was born less than an hour before. She was following the wheelbarrow and trying to lick him and touch him.
In order to produce milk, our dairy cow have to produce a calf every year. And in order that we're able to harvest the milk, the calves are removed from the mothers, usually within the first few hours after birth.
Professor Andrew Knight is critical of intensive farming methods. He believes that separating the calves from their mothers causes trauma.
The bond between a calf and the mother is a very strong bond, and it's very stressful for both the calf and for the mother for the calf to be removed.
Watching the calves being quickly separated from their mothers, it's easy to see how you can have an emotional response. But it's a fundamental part of mass milk production and happens on nearly every dairy farm in the UK. I've come to Tainton Court in Gloucestershire.
This is the milk tank room here.
It's a large dairy farm which has been recognised by the industry for its high welfare standards. They're happy to show me how and why they separate calves at birth. Roger Blowy is a vet who's been looking after the animals here for 40 years.
You can see the cows all lined up, and as soon as there's a space, the cow goes onto the platform.
We're here for the first of 2 daily milkings. Over the next few hours, 800 cows will pass through this rotating milking parlour. We haven't been here long when there's news that a cow is in labour.
Come on, girls, come on.
We head over to the calving shed.
Do you know how long she's been showing signs of it?
About an hour and a half.
How long would you leave it before you maybe intervene?
It's about this time, an hour and a half, 2 hours.
All right, here we go.
On examining the cow, there's a surprise in store.
Now that Alex examined it, there's two heads there.
So it's a twin birth.
Calving plays a vital part in the milk production process. Giving birth induces the cow to start producing milk, but little of that milk is destined for her own calves.
So the calf's going to be separated from the mother now?
The mother's going to be taken in to be milked so that we get the colostrum from the mother ready to feed the calf later.
Oh, I see, yeah.
Colostrum is the first milk from the cow.
Yeah.
And that first milk from the cow contains very high levels of antibodies.
It's essential for the calf's early development. But farm workers will then feed it to the calves by hand. By the time their mother returns from milking, they've been moved to another part of the farm.
They could be given that by hand and then returned to the mother.
They could, and if you did that, you would increase the amount of bonding between the mother and calf. And when the separation comes, then there will be, in my opinion, a greater amount of trauma when the separation eventually comes.
Once separated, the calves are unlikely to see their mothers again. James Griffiths has run this farm for 30 years. He says while cow-calf separation maximises the milk production, doing it in this way is also in the animal's best interests.
So is that the best option for the cow and the
We
calf?
absolutely genuinely believe so. You know, welfare is about health, happiness of the individual and the group. And in this case, even though it might be a tough hit at the start, we think it is the most healthiest thing to do.
So to what extent do the consumers who buy the milk in supermarkets know what's going on a dairy farm?
I suspect that they have a certain rose-tinted view of dairying in green fields all of the time. These cows go out to green fields every year. They probably don't realise some of the realities of what we do and how we do it, and particularly why we do it.
Many of us now have a greater interest in where our food comes from and the lives of the farm animals that feed us. The industry itself acknowledges that cow-calf separation is a difficult issue.
How big is your herd?
So approximately 200.
Abby Reeder is a dairy farmer in Wales and a board member of the National Farmers Union.
This is the biggest issue that dairy farms globally are focusing on. Most farms will separate calves from cows within the first 24 to 48 hours. It's a very complex issue. As an industry, we recognise that this is something difficult for consumers to grapple with.
It's 5:30 in the morning and I'm in southwest Scotland and I'm here to visit a dairy farm where they believe that cows deserve a rather less stressful existence. This is the morning milking at the Ethical Dairy. Here they allow the calves to stay with their mothers for 5 months and they only milk the cows once a day. Charles Ellett is in charge of the milking herd. He used to work on a large-scale dairy farm.
It doesn't take long for a cow to burn out, which is what those big herds have problems with. My oldest cow in here is 12 years old. She's just starting her 9th lactation. Most cows in commercial systems are gone after 4 or 5.
And why is that? Because their bodies are just burned out?
Just burned out.
He's had first-hand experience of cow-calf separation.
They shout and bawl, and they'll scream for that baby, pace around the pen.
The Ethical Dairy has a herd of 120 cows, owned by farmer David Finley.
We wanted to see, is it possible to create a more natural environment for our animals so that they are relaxed, they're stress-free, and they're productive and healthy.
Because you can see over here that the mothers are with the calves. And that's unusual, isn't it?
To say the least. I think the industry predicted that we wouldn't be able to make it work, both in terms of financial and in terms of practical application.
David Finley says that despite much of his cow's milk going to feed their calves, he makes it work financially. The milk he does take from the cows, he turns into profitable artisan cheese and ice cream, instead of selling it on as liquid milk. He also says keeping the calves with their mothers means they grow faster, so he can sell them sooner and keep his costs down.
When you look at the calves, these calves are thriving. They're growing more than twice as fast because they're consuming their own loads of their own mother's quality milk. Last year was profitable, and this year will be more profitable again.
Unlike the ethical dairy, many dairy farms have to try to make a profit selling only liquid milk. Prices have been kept low for years. Typically, farmers are paid between 31 and 38 pence a litre. That means making the cows as productive as possible.
We have invested a lot of money in genetics, and we have invested a lot of money in health, and those two hand in hand just mean we can bring out the best in the cow. The average yield for a dairy cow daily is about 23, 24 litres a cow, which is about 40% higher than it would have been about 30 years ago.
A lot of the market is exceptionally price competitive, particularly the sector that we're in, which is the liquid market. And there's a massive range within dairying of those who are making good money and those who are really, really struggling.
When selling liquid milk, the margins are tight across the industry.
There are effectively three legs to the dairy industry in the UK. There's the farmer, there's the milk processor, and then there's the retailer.
The retailers, mostly supermarkets, sell milk cheaply. You can get 4 pints for around £1.15.
I don't believe that supermarkets view milk, particularly liquid milk, as a profitable sector. It has been a loss leader. That has to stop.
So no one's really making much money out of milk then?
No one's made a great deal of money out of liquid milk.
Over the past few months, though, the price processors have paid farmers for a litre of milk has been rising due to a shortage in supply. But despite farmers currently getting paid more, many are still struggling as farm costs rise. Recent figures show that a quarter of dairy farms are failing to break even. And there are other challenges to running a dairy farm. On the farm in Wales, the undercover worker has noticed some of the cows are limping badly.
What is this? Ulcer. Ulcer? Yeah.
It was explained to me that the major cause is the huge stress that their body is going through because of the high milk production.
Food problems are very common with dairy cows. It's the same problems like beef cattle have, or no, beef cows don't have many problems with dairy cows. Why dairy cows have so many problems? Because they're under more stress. We expect more out of them.
I see these animals being bred every year to produce ever more milk, which is putting their bodies under strain. They get higher rates of lameness. It's already 30% amongst British dairy cattle, and it's a very painful condition in the later stages.
I showed the footage to vet Roger Blowy, who I met on the farm in Gloucestershire.
It would be unusual to find a dairy herd without any lameness, like common cold in man. The two factors that probably most affect lameness in cattle is, first of all, calving, and secondly, the amount of standing. Being milked frequently means that they have to spend a lot of time on concrete. A dairy cow that's giving a lot of milk probably has to spend 6 or 8 hours a day standing to feed.
On the Welsh farm, things were taking a darker turn. The undercover worker sees shovels and other implements used on cows. On other occasions, workers were seen punching cows. and even putting the boot in.
I can say that I've seen horrible things. The video did not cover it all, absolutely. I missed many events that I would be happy to capture.
Sometimes dairy cows lose their footing and can't get up. When this happens, there's a race against time to get them back on their feet before they suffer permanent nerve damage. It's especially challenging in a confined space like the milking parlour.
Instead of letting her calm down, maybe try to pull her in a gentle way, the first reaction was to kick her forcefully in the flank, in the stomach. The second reaction of other worker was to kick her in the back. And the consensus was that to pull her tail forcibly is the right thing to do.
The kicking only stopped once the cow was finally freed. What's your view?
That what he was doing was totally unnecessary and unwarranted.
Yeah.
You would certainly do something to encourage her to stand up. I might have just sort of given her given her front foot a poke or something like that.
Right.
So I can see the extreme frustration to the people that are there because the cow is down and the cow clearly has to be moved.
They're kicking that cow pretty hard at the moment. It's abuse, it's inhumane. This should not be occurring.
Other methods were also used for dealing with downed cows. A hip hoist can be used on farms to help cows regain their footing.
Correct procedure is that the hip hoist is applied to the hip bones gently, carefully and with skill and with a light touch.
When the workers had to move a stricken cow to an area where there was straw underfoot to help keep her upright, this light touch seemed to be absent.
The cow's meant to be raised to the point where it can just stand, and then the hip hoist is supposed to be immediately released and the cow's supposed to be supported gently on either side.
The cow was struggling to balance herself. She was just banged her head over the concrete again and again, howling, while the workers were laughing.
This poor cow's having its face dragged along the concrete. Oh my God, it's going up into the air. That's terrible. That's very obviously abuse. The worker is joking about it. What was not supposed to happen is that cows raised into the air using the hip hoist, which can significantly damage the bone and the soft tissues, causing further trauma. Not to imagine the amount of fear this cow must be enduring.
Farm vet Roger Blowy had a rather different take on the footage.
What's being done there is, in my experience, would be fairly common practice.
Is there not a potential to damage the hips?
I suppose there must be a potential, but I mean, it's done so commonly without any damage.
And isn't it also likely that the cow's in some distress or pain when that's happening?
Absolutely, definitely, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So what you have to balance is the stress and the pain of that over a short period of time to be put into a nice environment versus the alternative, which would be to being left where she was.
When animals are beyond help, the law requires them to be put out of their suffering promptly. But that didn't always happen on this farm. This cow was severely ill and in need of attention. A vet who was treating another cow at the farm was asked about it.
Have you seen the other cow, the recumbent one, it couldn't, the one is lying on the yeah.
The vet that was present acknowledged that they are suffering and advised prompt euthanasia.
But instead of paying the vet to euthanize the dying cow there and then, the cow was left until a slaughterman could put it down the following day.
I don't think she's in a lot of suffer. Probably suffering. There's a guy coming to it tomorrow. That cow seems to be in pain for a long time. Yeah. They don't want it like. Yeah, and when Slaughterman can come straight away, then it's great. But if they can't come to the day after, then it's not fair. Yeah.
It means she was suffering almost 24 hours from the time we saw her.
I would have expected them to have got the vet to have euthanized the cow. But even more surprising, I would have expected there would be somebody on farm who was capable of doing that sort of thing, so as soon as reasonably possible.
We took the undercover footage from the farm in Wales to a barrister who's handled many animal abuse prosecutions.
Children stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's hitting a cow with a shovel?
Yes, quite clearly. That would constitute an offence. We would prosecute something like that. It's basically an assault against the animal.
It's quite a hard watch, that, actually, isn't it?
It is. There's no good reason for kicking the animal while it's stricken. It's going to cause, especially to the stomach, some unnecessary suffering and pain.
So a likely breach of the law?
Yes. A hip hoist is a valuable tool for a farmer to use to get a stricken cow back up on its feet. The circumstances in which it's being used here are quite inappropriate.
Is it likely to be something that might be prosecuted?
Potentially, yes.
What's your view overall of what you've seen?
We've got a number of different types of criminal offences. It's frankly not an acceptable way to deal with cattle.
We wrote to the owner of the Welsh farm. His lawyers told us if workers had punched and kicked animals, a disciplinary process would start immediately. They say the farm continues to invest with particular regard to animal health and welfare.
Traceable, safe and farmed with care.
The UK dairy industry says it has some of the highest animal welfare standards in the world. As well as government regulations, 95% of dairy farms in the UK are signed up to an industry-run assurance scheme called Red Tractor.
Just look for the Red Tractor label.
Where Red Tractor comes in is that is a voluntary assurance scheme, and that is one that, as dairy farmers, we would sign up to. And that is a scheme with an add-on, so it goes over and above the regulations that the country sets on us.
The farm in Wales is Red Tractor assured, but for most commercial dairy farms, Red Tractor's animal welfare standards are considered to be the industry minimum.
For us, it's almost a background noise, so it's a pretty low bar. It's not a big issue for us one way or another.
Who's driving increasing standards in welfare in the industry then?
The dairies, they're feeling pressure from who they're selling milk to make sure that they can get traceability and accountability from the farms that are supplying them.
Processors or dairies who demand extra standards from the farms who supply them tend to pay them more for their milk. That money can then be used by the farmers to enhance welfare standards even further.
Farms that are receiving a better price have got a much better opportunity to progress quicker in terms of meeting their aspirational animal health and welfare targets. Even just one extra penny on a litre will enable a farmer to upgrade or take advantage of new technology that's out there to make sure that the cows are getting the best care that they can.
So where does the milk from the cows on the Welsh farm go?
If I want to test our milk, where it goes to? Fresh waste. The company called Fresh Waste.
Freshways supplies a lot of milk into the service industry, including to big brands such as British Airways and Costa Coffee.
Historically, Freshways has been one of the lower payers. They are taking advantage of the contract they've got with their farmer and passing all too often the price pressures back down the line onto that farmer who's supplying them. And it's something that as an industry we're trying to stop happening.
We've analysed the amount that Freshways has paid farmers over the last 7 years, and they've regularly been one of the lower payers. What that means is, for example, for a farm that produces 2 million litres of milk a year, if they'd been selling to one of the 5 best paying processors instead of Freshways, they'd have made around £240,000 more over that 7-year period.
Freshways says it has a track record of paying suppliers a competitive milk price and has been paying a leading price to suppliers since last October. It says Red Tractor aligns with its own expectations of welfare standards. Red Tractor says its scheme is the bedrock of progressive farming in Britain, and animal welfare is core to all that we do.
We wanted to find out how recently the Welsh farm has been inspected, so we contacted Red Tractor and two government inspectorates, the Food Standards Agency and the Animal and Plant Health Agency.
After we got in touch, all three carried out unannounced inspections at the farm. Red Tractor would only say that the farm is currently a member of its assurance scheme. We understand that neither of the government agencies identified any animal welfare concerns. Animal Equality has reported the Welsh farm to the local council and asked it to investigate their findings. Last year, Parliament approved a new law which increases the maximum prison sentences for those abusing animals from 6 months to 5 years. The government is also trying to introduce another piece of legislation, the Animal Sentience Bill.
It's really important that we recognise that they are sentient, that they've got the capacity to experience positive and negative emotions, that they may have strong social bonds with one another.
In Scotland, farmer David Finlay says he's faced hostility for doing things differently.
We're seen as fairly toxic by the industry now. There's very few dairy farmers will speak to me, very few.
Really? Wow.
And I'll probably be related to most of them. If we can make this work, then the question obviously is, why isn't everyone doing it?
Critics of intensive milk production believe only customers can drive change.
Consumer pressure is so important because ultimately, unfortunately, money talks, and the industry will do whatever is necessary to ensure that people buy their products.
Farmers themselves acknowledge that even the fundamentals of dairy farming, like separating newborn calves from their mothers, may have to change.
This is where the majority of research is going at the minute, and who knows, in 20 to 30 years' time, it may not happen. The key thing is, as an industry, if that's what the consumer wants, that's what we will provide.
As consumers, we've all got used to cheap milk. Over the past 10 years, the price has barely gone up at all.
We must learn from the egg industry. People are prepared to pay a few more pennies to have the free-range eggs. That is coming with dairy. Some people will pay additional money for their milk and dairy products.
Milk is far too cheap. Sometimes I look at the cows and think it's an insult to see it being sold at the rate that it is. It would be nice to have an option to think, yes, I will buy this milk at a higher price because I know that it's guaranteeing those standards.
If the price of contented farmers and their cows is a few extra pence on a litre of milk, the question is, are we willing to pay more?